Once upon a time, I was a liberal. Well, to be honest, less than a year ago, I was still a liberal.
The New York gay hairdresser you've just seen is the founder of the #WalkAway campaign and, according to CNN, a Russian bot. Or, according to the Huffington Post, a Russian asset followed mostly by Russian bots and some shills. So, is the #WalkAway movement a Russian operation? And if yes, how does it work and what does it want? If it isn't a Russian operation, then what is it? Let's explore. Всем привет и добро пожаловать в альтернативу свободы. Now, I sincerely intended to make this whole video in the Russian language, but then decided against it because then it would have meant I'd had to work extra time to make the subtitles, and I've already been uploading very few videos lately, so the last thing I need is to waste the precious time I have for the rest of this month extra on just one video instead of making several more. But Russian language skills aside, I've been busy in various agitation projects lately, most of them concerning my own country, and you can see some of that on the other channel. But in the meantime, I've also been closely following the WalkAway campaign. And by closely following, I mean subscribing to their channel when they barely had 300 subs, went on their Facebook group when it was tiny, and mostly ignored the hashtag on Twitter. I'll explain by the end of the video why the purposeful ignorance of Twitter. So, for the purposes of this talk, the presentation is divided as follows. 1. What is #WalkAway, with some brief history. Well, the whole history is brief, so it shouldn't be that hard. Number 2, is it a Russian operation? Number 3, what it seems and what it actually is. And by that I mean why people believe stuff about this that simply not only isn't true but cannot be true. Number 4, potential impact and threats. And number 5, conclusions. So, let's dissect this because it is really fascinating. So, the brief official history is basically like this. Brandon Straka, a low-tier actor and hairstylist from New York, puts out a video from which I quoted an excerpt at the beginning of this video. In that video, which I do urge you to watch, he basically says he used to be a leftist that cried when Donald Trump was elected, but then suddenly he noticed a few things that simply did not fit with his own narrative. And then he goes on to explain many things about the hypocrisy of the far left. In other interviews, for instance, he clarified that one of the moments that were quite decisive for him to start looking for answers somewhere else was when one of his friends pointed out to him that the cathedral media had indeed lied about Donald Trump having allegedly mocked a disabled person, and that in reality the president does that gesture routinely when he wants to describe someone whom he caught lying. Anyway, it's a well-made video, and Mr. Straka is certainly an interesting character in many ways. So his video goes viral, but not on Twitter or YouTube. His video on YouTube, on his original channel, The Unsilent Minority, has about 620,000 views. Impressive. But on Facebook, his video went through the roof with about 2.3 million views as of the moment of this recording. Now notice in the sprint screen that the initial publication occurred on May the 26th. I noticed it myself on June the 9th, a few days after I came back from the United States myself, and this kind of pissed me off a little bit, because if I had seen it earlier, I would have been able to help more, but that's a story for another day. Anyway, so as I was watching the whole thing picking up steam, I saw more and more people joining the Facebook group and posting, as Brandon called them, testimonials. Basically people writing why they had walked away from the Democratic Party, or people who are now walking away or considering walking away. You get the point. And when the whole thing became big enough to be noticed by low-tier leftist activists, they started calling the members of the walkaway as Russian bots. because reasons. So in response to that, Brandon starts asking individuals to submit video testimonials, preferably with their real name and a bit of background story. So some of them did. As of the moment of this recording, exactly 100 videos featuring the stories of about 120 people have been uploaded on the channel called #WalkAwayFanasite, which you can find here on YouTube. Now, those uploads started about 2 weeks ago, and they've been uploading them at a rate of about 5 videos per day. So probably by the time I publish this, there will be more than 100 videos to watch. On the Facebook group, the whole thing is even a bit more crowded. At least 400 videos as of the moment of this recording are available on the Facebook group dedicated to the #WalkAway campaign, with the oldest one being uploaded about 3 weeks ago. Quite impressive, I would say, in many ways. So this brings us to the second chapter. Is this a Russian operation? Well, the short version of the answer to this is pretty much like this. Well, Putin would have to be quite bloody rich to engineer such thing. Now, as someone who's been studying Russian agitprop long before CNN knew what that is, and long before Huffington Post or indeed MSNBC even existed in the first place, let me tell you a bit about how this would have to work in order for it to be a Russian operation. Now, there are two theories on the left about WalkAway. One, that this is a full-fledged active measures type of operation, and by active measures I mean активные мероприятия, the KGB sense. And the other theory on the left is that WalkAway started the way the founder says it did, but it was amplified by active measures, and it is being propped up by Russian bots and troll farms. So let's look with all honesty at both of these hypotheses. Now, in order for the #WalkAway to be a full-fledged активные мероприятия type of operation, this requires quite a decent amount of money that any intelligence operator will tell you it's a total waste. So, for starters, they'd have to pay Brandon Straka himself. He lives in New York, so he'd charge quite a bit just as a basic wage for agitation. Then they would have to boost his video on Facebook. To get a post boosted to a meager 100,000 people, that already costs about $10,000 in the United States. As it turns out, Facebook charges differently by geography. American eyeballs are amongst the most expensive in the Facebook ecosystem. Then after that, they would have to boost his comment section, at least for the first month of the campaign, with a troll farm, or at least allocate 50 or even 100 people to work on this. Now, the Kremlin might be getting cheaper labor over there at the Lubyanka building, but a troll farm for a case is not really that cheap, even in Russia, especially considering that very proficient English speakers are quite expensive in Russia. Not to mention the labor that would have to go into creating at least 1,000 credible American Facebook profiles that don't get banned in the first 10 seconds. And believe me, that is not easy. Or don't believe it. Try it yourself. See how complicated it is to create and successfully introduce a bullshit Facebook account into the ecosystem and then keep it in good standing for more than 1 day. Again, I'm not saying this is impossible, but I am saying all of this piles up and the Russians would have to pay for it. Remember, we are working under the assumption that this is a full-fledged active measures operation. Now, all of this is adding up to at least $1 million, and we didn't even start the operation yet. Then you'd have to find some actual Americans willing to kickstart the whole video testimonials thing. That's not cheap at all, especially if you are aiming for serious credibility. And then you'll have to also further invest in boosting those initial videos as well. And what I described here is only the first 2 weeks of the campaign. If this were to be a full-fledged Russian-paid active measure, this whole thing would have had to cost at least $5 million just by this moment. And the result? Well, from the perspective of the KGB, again, assuming the KGB is behind this and assuming the goal is to harm the Democrats, as the CNN says, the results so far are nowhere near that relevant. Long story short, The hypothesis of the full-fledged active measures is simply not feasible unless everyone in the KGB went full insane and full amnesia and forgot everything, including the very public tools of agitation and subversion. But then there is the more, let's call it moderate, hypothesis advanced by the Huffington Post, namely that the campaign itself is not a Russian operation, but that Kremlin-linked provocateurs and bots have helped hype the whole thing by, quote, replicating chosen messages tens of thousands of times, unquote. This hypothesis is based on the findings of an obscure website funded by a dodgy organization which claims to be bipartisan. The Alliance for Securing Democracy is that organization which operates the website Hamilton-68. Now, for the sake of the argument, let us assume that this is all legit. The website in question says about Walkaway the following, quote, activity spiked on July the 2nd when Hamilton-68 noted 73 unique tweets using hashtag Walkaway and roughly another 50 using related campaign hashtags such as hashtag Walkaway movement. The late engagement suggests Kremlin-oriented accounts are trailers rather than leaders of the campaign, but the high level of current engagement indicates an effort to astroturf support for the movement and hijack the narrative. This includes several monitored accounts that have changed their handles to include the hashtag or that have shared their own supposed walkaway moments. The campaign also received a direct boost from Russian propaganda outlets like RT and Sputnik, both of which ran stories on the movement, close quote. Seriously, that's their argument. So apparently, you are a Russian bot or a Russian operation because RT and Sputnik wrote about you. By that standards, the anti-ICE Democrats are Russian bots because Sputnik wrote a rather favorably story about them on July the 6th. Chuck Schumer might also be a Russian bot because Sputnik wrote a story about him as well. Or maybe not. Maybe Sputnik and RT, just like CNN, the Huffington Post, Fox News, PJ Media, and many other outlets, simply wrote about Walkaway because it was, you know, newsworthy. Okay, but what about the bots, the legitimate bots? Yeah, what about them? At the moment of this recording, there are about 680,000 tweets about this and by roughly 43,000 authors, creating about 1.6 million impressions on Twitter. The think tank that the Huffington Post is quoting is talking about 50 tweets, not 50,000, 50. I'm sorry, but one has to be truly insane to believe that 50 tweets from questionable sources influence in any way the course of a hashtag. And this is why I ignored Twitter altogether, because the whole thing started on Facebook and the founder still attempts to coordinate it through Facebook. So even if there had been more than 0.02% bots on Twitter, it would still be irrelevant since the campaign's digital headquarters is not on Twitter. If anything, the percentage of fake accounts appears to be remarkably low. On any issue, it's usually at least 3%, sometimes slightly higher. Heck, President Obama lost about 2.5 million followers when Twitter purged a bunch of fake accounts and bots a few weeks ago. So, based on that alone, I seriously question what the think tank is saying. With 43k authors, I would have expected to see at least 800 or 1,000 fake accounts. The point I'm trying to make here is that fake accounts are simply unavoidable. There's nothing any individual user can do about them, and there's nothing anyone who starts a hashtag can do about them. You can't just ban fake accounts from a hashtag, but you can ban fake accounts on a Facebook group. And Brandon has been quite diligent with this so far. When I joined the group, I had to answer several questions, which, by the way, it would take quite a lot of work to engineer different answers with bots in such a way that Brandon or his friends who manage the group don't figure it out. Again, we are now working under the assumption that only the boosting is being done by Kremlin assets. So, even if we are to take everything being said by the left about hashtag walkaway with respect to the possibility of Russian interference, even if we take all of that seriously, it still doesn't stand up to basic scrutiny. Because again, to prove interference, you'd have to prove not just the existence of a few fake accounts or even the existence of Kremlin-related bots retweeting this. You have to prove that those bots have a decisive influence on the spread of the issue. With 50 tweets or 70 users out of 680,000 tweets and over 40,000 authors, that's very, very far away from reasonable suspicion, let alone decisive influence. So with this, I think I thoroughly answered the question on whether this is a Russian operation. Basically, no. At best, a few Russian assets dipped their toes to see if there's anything useful in there, and then they walked away. I mean, seriously, you'll have to come up with more than this, and the hysteria that anything and everything is a Russian bot does a lot more harm to the very serious issue of Russian interference, which does exist in many other ways and places, but with such dishonest reporting, nobody is going to believe it when it actually happens. This is basically the scenario I was afraid of, and I was afraid it might happen when I made the video about Duginism several years ago, that the left will pick up the issue and destroy it with their hysteria and sloppy judgments. Anyway, let's go to chapter 3. So, what does walk away seem to be that actually terrifies some Democrats, and what it actually is? Well, on its face, and upon studying this for at least 2 weeks, this appears to be a project started by a chap who, like many others, saw a bit through the bullcrap of the far left and then started digging. And he kept on digging until he noticed that, holy shit, the web of lies is quite huge. So, like many others, he decided he needs to do something. So he joins the Republican Party. That's something Brandon is not shy to admit, but to my surprise, it's an information that almost never appears in the media. But then what? I mean, okay, I joined the Republican Party. I saw how I was wrong and I tried to get things better. Now what? So again, like many others, he started asking himself, what else can it be done? And because he's an actor, well, making videos must have come quite naturally to him. So he makes the video, and for a while, about 2 weeks, nothing significant happens. Then a few pundits notice the video and share it, and then it freaking explodes. And because I followed this from much earlier, he freaked out a bit. I mean, oh my god, okay, this one explodes, now what? He mentions multiple times in various interviews a conservative friend who encouraged him. Now, I suspect the conservative friend is someone who knows a bit more about agitation, so that individual likely suggested to Brandon to go on Twitter and seek some allies. And I wouldn't be totally surprised to learn that the decision to push individuals to post video testimonials was not really just an emotional reaction from Brandon, but rather a tactical move to get ahead of the narrative. That's what I would have done too, by the way, so kudos to Brendan or his advisor or whoever came up with this idea. That's exactly how you play something like this. Now, admittedly, Brendan has been in media circles for over a decade, so it's not really that hard to believe that he came up with this all by himself. Former leftists who used to or still do work in media tend to be very efficient activists, especially media activists, or at the very least individuals who are aware of the playbook and understand how to game the media. Late Andrew Breitbart comes to mind, or Horowitz, or Gavin McInnes, or Katarina Janouch in Sweden, or indeed Donald Trump, and many others. And this is what the left is seeing too. They see themselves, they see their methods being quite reasonably well used against them. And that bloody terrifies them. I should know a thing or two about that. So, when the left sees this, in their good tradition of denial, they can't simply say, oh well, we just lost one of our own, it happens. No. You see, on the far left, this never happens. With a few exceptions, I would say such as George Packer from The New Yorker, who at least attempted to understand this phenomenon 2 years ago. He failed, by the way. His article ends in garbage, but has quite a few good points along the way, so you should read it, by the way. Anyway, But with these few exceptions, almost nobody on the left even considers the possibility of leftists just walking away from the left. You can see this in the language of the leftist pundits. You will notice, for instance, when they discuss the Supreme Court, they never consider the possibility of a leftist justice to start moving towards the right, or at the very least to something more centrist. Their talk is always about how a certain conservative or originalist justice, or more, can be flipped. This kind of thinking permeates almost any strategy devised by the left, so when they see what they perceive to be the unthinkable actually happening on any scale larger than a few individuals, their reaction is to panic. So it's through panic that they react with talk about Russian bots or Russian interference. And when that fails, and it is failing, their next talking point will be that Brendan is paid by the Koch brothers. And when that will fail, and it will, their next talking point will be that the movement doesn't exist. And when that will fail, they'll say that Brandon is basically a paid shill, and they'll argue this based on him being a registered Republican. And when that will fail, they'll try to minimize the impact, likely going back to the more Russians and more fake accounts type of arguments. Rinse and repeat. The perpetual revolution goes on. And there is your answer. Panic is what makes so many individuals believe things that simply cannot be true. If you go on Plebit, on Our Politics, you see their seasoned consumers of politics who really want to believe that it's all a sham, a farce, and a Russian conspiracy. One of their arguments against the legitimacy of most of the stories is that many of the accounts sharing testimonials are now on Reddit. Or are new on Reddit, sorry. Well, yeah, so, I mean, how should I put this? Believe it or not, the average person doesn't spend time on Plebit. Heck, I don't spend time on Plebit either. I have a bot that scans things for me and brings me the relevant threads. And I'm not the only one. Every single serious political operative uses similar tools. That's why Reddit is not to be taken seriously on political matters most of the time, because oftentimes it's just a ping pong between our bots and their bots. Another argument is that many testimonials are shared by users who are also members of the famous and infamous the Donald subreddit. Again, how is that suspicious? Many of the video's testimonials do talk about how many of those individuals have had their so-called walk-away moment around the election of President Trump, either before the election or immediately after it. Heck, the founder is a chap who had his walk-away moment because of Donald Trump, in a way. So why would it be surprising that those who would spend time on Reddit would be members of the Donald subreddit? Just ask yourself that, leftists, and on like this it goes. Admittedly, it doesn't help that some legit trolls have also joined the party and started posting contrived bullcrap and bait because, well, because why not? But no, seriously, anyone who takes his or her information about political trends from Reddit is someone who really doesn't understand how any of this works. And this is true for both sides. I mean, if you're willing to base judgment on what the user H8TE is saying on Reddit in response to the user fuckballs shit ass, then you have a problem. So yeah, basically walkaway is being interpreted in a quite extreme way by the left due to mostly panic, but also due to the leftist tradition of denial. You have to remember, this is the political side that denied the crimes of Stalin for decades and still denies mass killings conducted by leftists to this day. Denial is baked into the cake, really, and when that fails, then soon enough the "that wasn't real leftism" excuse will come out. In fact, I suspect that if the walkaway campaign grows further, which it might, then soon enough we'll see leftists questioning individual testimonials on whether those people were real Democrats to begin with. Now, this is what walkaway seems from a political operative perspective, whether on the right or on the left. If one delves deeper into it, however, one will notice that many of the claims being attributed to the campaign are actually not being made by their actual members or the campaign itself. For instance, several testimonials, not many though, are about walking away from the Republican Party. Quite a lot of them are about walking away from the Democrats, but with explicit denunciation of the Republican Party as well, namely leftists who just don't like the Democrat Party but are not keen on conservative ideas or ideals either. So contrary to various claims on the internet, this baby is a bit more complex than that. So that is how we get to Chapter 4, the potential impact of walk away. So far I've referred mostly to the left. Now let's refer a bit to the right. Don't get your hopes up too high. Seriously, that's the main message. Dear fellow deplorables, don't get your hopes too high. Walkaway is likely not a Russian operation, but there is no relevant evidence so far that it will have a significant impact. A lot of the testimonials are from people who have indeed walked away, but have done so more than 2 years ago. So while the right can surely count on their vote this November, it doesn't necessarily mean this could bring new votes. Maybe it will. In fact, I hope it will. But let's not get ahead of ourselves here, shall we? As I've been saying multiple times in the last 6 months, a lot more attention needs to be paid to direct action. The walk-away campaign has produced one so far, with the fine ladies in Illinois who took it to the streets. Now that's good, but we also need another 2,000 such direct actions by November. Also, this baby could increase its impact a bit more if it would enlist the support of individuals who've been doing on-the-ground agitation and changes of hearts and minds, such as, and I know this is not a popular opinion, Candace Owens of the Turning Point USA. That organization has been remarkably efficient in winning hearts and minds into what political operatives call the invisible electorate, which is basically people who rarely, if ever, hang out on social media, or if they do, they don't use their real names and tend to stay away from the online political stuff. Those are the people to whom the right never preached to until very recently, and if there is to be a numerically significant walk away, that is where it will come from. And the political operatives on the right shouldn't spend too much time, if any, trying to argue the walk-away message with die-hard leftists on Plebit. It's simply a waste of resources. I mean, sure, the cathedral and the wider left will go to great lengths to deny anything and everything about this. Of course they will. Why wouldn't they? It's their most efficient tactic for now. The hashtag Walkaway campaign group on Facebook has roughly 150,000 members, with about a fifth of them being explicitly foreigners, mostly Canadians and Brits, but also some other Europeans, and probably 3 to 5% fake-ish accounts. Again, this is unavoidable. And at least one Russian, though a Russian immigrant who is a citizen.
My name is Lily, and I'm not a Russian bot. I'm just a Russian.
But no, seriously, at this size, the left can safely ignore it. And that's fine. Instead of spending time to get their acknowledgement, much more efficient use of time is to spend it on getting new people on board, preferably people who have not voted for Trump. Those can make a difference. Other than that, Brendan and his crew should just keep doing what he's been doing, because some of those testimonials get in and of themselves more than 100,000 views on YouTube, which is the kind of exposure of conservative message from average people that the right hasn't got in years. And while the impact for the midterms is unlikely to be enormous, the longer-term impact could be big if this is played right. Now, many leftist commentators on this topic seem to forget that this walk-away thing didn't just started to happen or even be popularized with and by Brandon Straka. This particular campaign is just the latest incarnation of a longer-term phenomenon. Amazon.com is full of books with confessions from former leftists, and YouTube channels have been doing a lot of good work in this department too. Heck, even I got several walk-away types of stories in the comment section of this channel without even trying so much lately, as I've shifted towards tactics-related content. So the idea that this could not have grown organically without Russian interference, or worse, that this is all Russian bots and fake, comes simply from the realm of leftist fiction. All the right needs to do is to remain disciplined and skeptical within reason. That's it. If the walk-away campaign gets bigger, that's great. If it doesn't, it's no big deal. So, in conclusion, and I guess this is chapter 5, patience and tobacco, as I usually say. There's no reason to get over-optimistic or over-enthusiastic about this campaign, but there is every reason to approach it with a moderate dose of optimism. I mean, some of those video testimonials are great material for combating blackpilling, so for that alone, and this whole thing is great. If it ends up being in practice just a morale-raising tool that doesn't fulfill its intent, well, so what? Just do keep in mind that such thing called subversion does exist, and it is an amoral tool. It's good that many non-leftists learned finally how to use it, but do keep in mind the opposition has 100 years of experience in this. And that's all I'm going to say for now, because the video has already gotten too long. So, what do you all think? Please, by all means, tell me about the hashtag walkaway campaign, especially if you don't like it or have suspicions about it. You'll notice that I carefully avoided to express a personal opinion about this whole thing, and that's because I have not formed an opinion on it. I merely observed it from a propaganda and agitation perspective and tried to understand the organized opposition to it. Now, that's useful, but it skews a lot of perspectives, so maybe you can offer those. What do you think am I missing? And please do tell me down below. I'll be spending the next 3 weeks or so making new videos, and I'll definitely be catching up with the comments as well. So with all of that being said, thank you all for watching. Thank you for your consistent and generous support. Please do consider giving a shekel if you derive any value from the work being done here. Do subscribe to my social media, and I will see you all very soon on the Freedom Alternative. Or perhaps I should say, w alternatywę swobody. Do widzenia.